Well, first of all, thank you all very much for being here today. Uh, so let me just give like a quick introduction to everybody. So here we have, let's start from top to bottom. Frank Chavira, okay?
Hello,
He's an
hello.
English teacher on TikTok and social media as well. So Frank, could you just tell us something very fast about you and what you do on social media?
Well, yeah, sure, by all means, man. Okay, so I started teaching online 6 years ago in the year 2018. So I guess that's a bit longer, than, a bit over 6 years, right? I started teaching English in the year 2000, so that's 25 years already, and decided to just like adapt my feet in the digital realm of English teaching 6, 7 years ago. And I realized that if I wanted to get, like an international audience, I also had to have like social media presence. So I made it a commitment to myself and to my business that like I needed to have some sort of following, right? So I started posting, but realized that there was a lot of competition. Like if like face-to-face physical competition was fierce, then like you can only imagine what it was like online. So I decided that I needed to have a niche, some sort of differentiator that like would have people look my way. And I decided to start posting content precisely focused on pronunciation, something that many teachers kind of overlooked, or like relegated to I don't know, like to a second place in the teaching. And I wanted to make that then my strength. And ever since then, I mean, I've dabbed with many other type of material or other type of content, but pronunciation has actually been the one that's has worked for me the most. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you guys, and can't wait to hear about your stories.
Perfect. Thank you, Frank. Thank you very
My
much.
pleasure.
Then, Gary, can you tell us just a little bit about you and what you do on social media?
Yeah, so well, I started teaching well before the internet was invented. I started like very early 1990s. Yeah, I actually didn't start teaching online until COVID. I avoided teaching online. I thought it was this horrible idea, and then out of necessity, I had to. And then I realized how much I loved it. It's great. It just opens up so many things. With regard, and like you, Frank, I realize that the future is online, but it's also to do with getting your students. That's how you get them, is through online. So I started past tense of banana, and just almost like everybody, just started uploading advice and information about English, and at the same time shouting and screaming at the screen at all of these TikTok English teachers. And
So cool.
friends just said to me, you should switch on your camera when you do that. And so I did, and it just seems to have resonated with quite a few people. So in literally 1 month, I went from about 200 followers on TikTok to almost 100,000
It's
in
taken
one
me
month.
6 years to get to that. So
Yeah,
I
it's
you got to
know.
honestly,
share the
it's
tips,
luck.
man.
No, it's for me, it was pure luck. I just did the right thing at the right time with the right subtitles, and that was it. So nothing special at all. And now I'm on something like 150,000. So yeah, it's been great. But yeah, that's my experience.
Nice.
Perfect. Well, and a little bit, I think that we all know want to know. I mean, I already did, but I we want to know why is it the past tense of banana. So let's save that for a little while,
Okay,
okay?
so very, very short. I spent a lot of time, as I'm sure everybody did, saying things like, it's not walkhead, it's walked, and it's not talkhead, it's talked. And then I just discovered if you remove the verb, and so you don't, it's not mechanical, it's not about English, it's about the sound, and you just throw anything in there. So I just said, okay, you know what, banana. What's the past? Because I love bananas. Using bananas in English, it's great because it's a very unusual fruit. Everybody recognizes it. It's very easy to spell, very easy to pronounce, no matter what your language or your level is. So I just went, okay, banana. What's the past tense of banana? And then people started to say bananaed. And I went, yes, that is the sound we want. And then I also had past tense of elephant, which of course is elephanted.
Of course.
And I just found that works a lot better than using the verbs. And so that for me became the ethos of how I teach and what have you. So yeah, that's it. Past tense of banana.
Nice.
Awesome.
Very
Awesome.
good.
Awesome.
Thank you very
Right.
much.
That's genius, actually.
Yes, it is.
That's right.
Very good. Let's continue with David. Tell us, David, what is it about you?
Well, I feel I'm the youngest over here. I don't have so much experience like teaching English, but I've been creating content for social media since I have a cell phone. I mean, I love videos, but I have always focused on comedy, on humor, on creating jokes. So, but at home, I grew up with my parents who are English instructors, and both of them, and English is part of me. I mean, teaching English is part of me. It's something I love, and I decided to, well, after out of necessity, I decided to create content like, okay, I can teach English, but my way, like with my jokes, with my stuff. Yeah, just to share my knowledge, because what I've always chased is to be a comedian, and also right now my goals are more like teaching English through content, through what I do. And I think what I love the most about English is grammar. I love it. I like to the way it is structured. I like to learn, and yeah, I mean, Academia Indiscreta is the name because basically I don't have a filter. I say bad words, and I speak my way. I don't, and I just want people to enjoy the process more than feeling it like really tough uh, path to go. So yeah, basically that would be it.
Thank
Very
you,
interesting,
David.
man.
And actually, he had like pretty nice content. I mean, I love it. He started like doing like this kind of little drawings on a paper and explain like differences of how you say things in English and in Spanish. And I mean, it really got like people's attention in there. And I mean, it's just amazing what you do, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, and it took really little too. I mean, from the first month, 100,000 followers, and I've been with my account for over 2 years, and I have 800,000 followers. So I know that my content go straight to Latin American, mostly people, maybe from Spain too, but mostly people who speak Spanish, because sometimes they find difficult to understand English when it's just English. But yeah, basically that's it. And we grow every day.
Nice. Thank you very much, Dave. And Hugo, my friend, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi guys, everybody. Well, actually, I don't do social media. I
Yet.
started teaching.
Yet.
I don't know if I will, but I started. I'm old school because I started teaching back, just like Gary, back in the early 90s. And well, right now I'm teaching at university. My students are pre-service language teachers, French and English language teachers, and I mainly teach language assessment, and and English. I don't stop teaching English. Many of my colleagues who are applied or formal linguists have decided that teaching language is not is not very good for their status. I think that I've decided to keep on teaching English, and so I've never stopped teaching English since I started. But I also teach language assessment, right? And as I said, I'm old school. I hate teaching online actually, and I don't know how to do it. I did it during the pandemic, but I think it was the worst English class ever. And I'm not used to teaching online. Yeah. So I have been talking with Fernando about it and the advantages of teaching online. And I don't do social media, and I don't do online teaching. So, but I'm also renovating. I'm still old school, but I am in the process of innovating and renovating.
Nice. Thank you very much for that. So, as I told you before, the idea of this like a group session, let's call it not like a debate, but it's just like kind of exchanging different points of view towards the way that we teach language, the way that we teach English. So first, we can get like new ideas, right? Like as Hugh was saying, I mean, he might not be in the path of teaching online. We teach like different aspects of language, and we have like our own way to do it. So the thing here, like just to expose what we think is what works for students. So anybody out there that can get to see this session can really have like a different face or a different way of expecting results, right? So the first thing that I would love to ask you all guys is, how do you personally define descriptive and prescriptive teaching? I mean, what's the deal with it? Should we stick to the rules, or should we go out of the box? Because we have like different profiles in here, like different ways of teaching. So that's what I would like to start this conversation with. How would you define like descriptive and prescriptive teaching? So let's start with Frank. Tell us.
Alrighty. So, I mean, my own definition is, what pretty much every grammar book might tell you. Prescriptive grammar is what the books dictate, right? What linguists and grammarians actually say should happen. And then descriptive grammar is actually what happens, So, talking about prescriptive grammar, for example, about not finishing a sentence with a preposition, for example, right? And then in reality, you hear that happening all the time, right? So it's like the use and usage of the language and the way it should be and the way it actually is, right? So that's the most succinct definition of what's the difference between these two types of grammar approaches would be, right? And I don't know if there was another question that followed up this one, or is it just about the way I see the distinction between these two?
Because actually the next thing I would like to ask basically is like, when you were a student, because you also started learning English, but when you were a student, how do you encounter more often or how were you I don't remember the word. How was it that you learned? More in a prescriptive way, like being taught by the
prescriptive,
book?
100%. Mm-hmm.
And then later on in your life, when you started like developing your skills, was it more like finding new ways of expressing, and then you took that as part of your teaching, or did you just follow the path of the book for a little while? And when was like that point when you started like stop teaching, or you stopped teaching in a prescriptive way, and then you started like teaching like English that you can see like every day with native speakers and how they differentiate their speaking from others?
So I started learning English. It was 100% prescriptive, and that's because mainly, when I learned it, most of my teachers actually followed a traditional teaching approach, right? So, I started learning when I was, well, probably in the year 90 something, right? I was still a teenager back then, and the teachers I had in Mexican public education weren't the weren't the best, unfortunately. So they just followed the book. They didn't even speak the language themselves. So they just followed the book, and what was on the book was prescriptive grammar. And that actually ignited my love towards grammar. I got to tell you, like the way it ought to be used, and either in spoken or written way. And that's the way I fell in love with language, and more specifically with grammar. And later on, I found out that what the books dictated and the way it was used were like worlds apart. And that's when I started to realize that not necessarily following a book would be the key to understanding or to the interactions in English, right? So yeah, I mean, I started with prescriptive language, but then completely turned my focus on descriptive, on how actually the language is used. And well, I don't want to hog the floor here. So like that's in a nutshell that my experience with these two.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to throw the ball, as we say it in Spanish, right? Que aventarte la pelotita. David, what do you think?
Well, I talk from my experience because I learned I know English as a second language, and I take I think different, kind of different from Frank, because, for example, I love grammar, but I think that the most important thing is that you enjoy the process. Uh, when I learned the English, I used to love where I studied the language because I had friends, dynamics, good teachers. It was a great experience in a way that, yeah, I used to stick to the books. They used to teach me stick to the books. And it was, but I didn't find it like frustrating or stressful because I was just spending a great time. So after that, that only took, I don't know, maybe 1 year and a half. I started to learn English and enjoy the process of learning English by myself. I find grammar, I use grammar or I use books as a reference to or as a manual or instructions to go, but to take. But I don't usually use what they talk about on the books. I don't know, they find some stuff people find boring. And I think when they are bored and also stressed because they don't understand is when the process is not going to um, it's not going to flow. So in this case, I like to teach using the grammar, and I focus on spending a great time with my students so that they enjoy the process and they can learn more than the books. After, okay, you use does, she, like, but then she says, okay, my student says, okay, teacher, but they ask, she likes, and I say, yeah, that's great. You can say that too. But when you know the debate with like how it's supposed to be, okay, then the way you feel that you can play with the language after you know how it works, I think it's great. It's even funnier, but it's even more fun in this case. So yeah, basically that's my opinion about your question, Fernando.
Thank you. And Frank, you wanted to say something. By the way, just like a quick parenthesis, if you have something to say and you want to like say something, just please feel free to raise your hand so I can give you like the space. So Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Just a quick note. I guess I was very lucky. The fact that even though my teachers were like very traditional in the way they taught grammar and very boring to, I'm gonna say, most people, I was lucky enough that I ended up loving grammar, like traditionally as it was taught, right? So like that actually ignited my love for grammar. And like probably if it had been, in the fun way, I would have developed a love for well, what I actually do now, which is focus on communication, rather than on grammatical rules. But yeah, I mean, I guess I was lucky that I also liked grammar traditionally, right? So okay.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Gary, I mean,
Yes.
being a native speaker, what is your insight about this?
So I like everybody, I learned the language as well. And I learned it prescriptively as well, just at a very, very younger age, like my parents would tell me, what the right word was for things. And then my teachers would tell me the right order of words and the right grammar structures and things like that. I honestly don't have a problem with what's regarded as prescriptive teaching. I find it very difficult to understand how any teacher can advocate descriptive. Well, no, actually, okay, not teaching, but English. I think prescriptive English is what we all use. That's why we teach. If we're saying there's no rules and it's a free for all, then you go to the classroom you get your wage at the end of the month, and then, you know, you advocate online the exact opposite of what you've been doing in the classroom. So for me, yeah, it's a problem. I had just a little side story. I had somebody, one of the teachers, respond to one of my TikTok videos. And she was, I'm not going to, I will probably accidentally give away the identity, but I don't mean to. And she was complaining that I was criticizing her pronunciation of a certain word that she gave. And she, you know, in her email, it was all about, look, there are different accents, there are dialects and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, great, that's absolutely true. Why are you making a video about pronunciation? If there's a billion different ways of saying that word, why are you making a video which indicates this is how you say the word? So I think there's an issue about prescriptive teaching. I think that is a huge problem, and we need to walk away from that. But this idea of prescriptive English being a bad thing, I think it's a great thing. Like David has said, it's, you know, you have to learn the rules before you break them, you know. So I think prescriptive English is great. We all use it. If you condemn it, I think you're being a bit of a hypocrite, quite frankly. I'm not saying anybody here is, but, you know, I get a lot of messages from people doing on my TikTok saying, you know, there's a billion ways of saying this. Well, okay, but then there can't be any English teachers. It's one or the other.
Perfect. And I mean, based on what you're saying, Gary, like, will you be okay, like, when teachers or social media content creators expose like the correct way of pronunciation of, or the correct way to articulate some sounds, when in reality they're like very different variations from the same word in terms of pronunciation? So will you be okay by saying, okay, this is like the standard way in some specific geographic part, but if you pronounce it this other way and it's perfectly understandable, that will be okay?
Yeah, I think we have to distinguish between an online teacher and a content creator. If you are just making a video and, you know, you happen to say a word in an accent, that's fine. If you make a video where you are implicitly or explicitly stating that this is how you say the words, then you can't then go and say, hey, but there's 1,000 different variations. Because then every video you make is like, I mean, let's take the word banana, for example. You know, if you want to say bernanar, then, you know, that's fine. You know, if there's people out there that say it like that, then there is no correct way of saying banana. How can you make a video about the pronunciation of the word banana? It's one thing or the other. So I think if you are presenting yourself as an authority on how you say this word, then implicitly in your video, you are saying, actually, no, it's explicitly, you are saying in your video, this is how you say the word. So you can't then later on say, there's a million ways you can say the word. One thing or the other.
Okay. Hugo, I
I
would
have
love, tell me.
okay, sorry,
David,
you go.
go.
Yeah, we haven't heard you go. Sorry. You go, come on.
All right. Well, I think prescription comes from the standard, right? And the standard has been created in order to be understood and to communicate, right? The point of everything we were talking today is communication, and well, Gary has mentioned that there are dialects and thousands ways of to pronounce something, and that's true. That's very true. And in the end, it's all about communication. And the idea of the standard is that you need to get your message across, and you need to communicate, right? So the standard or the prescription or the prescriptive way of teaching helps that, right? So it helps our students to communicate. So if they use the standard, they can talk to an Australian, they can talk to a West Londoner or or a person from Texas, I don't know, a person from India or Mexico, everywhere. So that's what the standard is for, right? To really help second language learners communicate, and that's what we're teaching, right? Of course, we cannot teach all the dialects around the world. That's naive to even think about it. But I think prescription comes from there, right? So, and on the other hand, we have this descriptive way of teaching, and I agree that you cannot. Well, not that you cannot, but well, let me get to back to one idea I have. Language also depends on the context, right? There is no right or wrong in the language. I mean, if you don't pronounce something right, or you don't have the right syntax, and you still get your message across, you're communicating. It helps, right? But it depends on the speaker, and it depends on your interlocutor. The person you're talking about, you're talking with, right? Or you're communicating with. And it depends if it's orally or written language, right? If you're talking to a person and the person is a native speaker who, I don't know, who has certain social status will judge you, right? And it has a lot of an impact on your on the speaker, right? So what do you want as a second language speaker? Do you want to communicate, or do you want to get into the context of your interlocutor, right? So and different people have different needs, and they need descriptive or prescriptive way of learning according to their needs and context, right? For a housewife who wants to travel around the world, I mean, I'm saying housewife, I hope I don't, or a person, any person who wants to travel around the world and just for vacation, and so some very basic English is necessary, probably. But if you want to get into an academic or professional world, you may need some more accurate and more precise and more prescriptive kind of learning, right? That's what I think.
Okay. Gary, I think that you wanted to say something, right?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I'm happy to jump in, but if somebody else, I don't want like Frank, I don't want to hog the floor. So I'm happy to back down a little bit. But yeah, I have things I could say. It's up to you.
Feel free to go. Go.
Well, I'm just a bit baffled. Like if like Hugo, you said that there's no right and wrong. So how can you teach? This would be something that would like if I could go up to you and show you an orange and say it's a banana, am I wrong?
No, of course not.
I'm not wrong.
No, I mean, I get your point, but no, there's no right or wrong. The right or wrong is I mean, it's a prescription, and the right or wrong is just something that has been made up just to for social reasons. Yeah, I mean, I have an example, and I have an example. I don't know if I'll be clear because it's in Spanish, but here in Mexico there are some regions in which they say ancina, right? Ancina, which means así, right? So people who say ancina is considered by people in the city as as a totally wrong Spanish, right? But it's a social construct because in the place where people say this word, ancina, it's very common. And people from all different social status say this word, but the people who come to the city, not the people who stay rural, start talking like the people from the city. So for the people back in the town, it's totally right. For the people in the city, it's totally wrong. So who is right and who is wrong? Is there really a right or wrong?
Well, maybe in that context, there isn't. But that to me would be dialect, would be accent, and that's fine. And I think if we can acknowledge that those differences exist without having to abandon the idea of prescriptive English. Because to me, if there's no prescriptive English, there actually is no dialect. Because every dialect, every accent is the same value of okay, I don't want to say value, is the same type of English, shall we say. You know, we need a standard in order to understand a deviation from that standard.
Right, you're right.
I have a
Okay.
question for Frank. Frank, you said what you like the most about teaching is pronunciation.
What I specialize
So
in.
it's pronunciation. In this case, I agree with Gary because I think if you see my videos, you'll see that I don't usually talk about pronunciation. Maybe 10 videos, one is about pronunciation because for me it's very delicate. Okay, it's like I say something away. I won't teach something. I mean, I can know the phonetics of the word, but it's a ground that I don't want to mess with, you know.
Mhm.
So, but I think, well, I want to ask you what's your opinion in this case? Because if you, for example, if you teach the word tomato, no
Tomato.
tomato or
Mhm.
tomato,
Mhm.
which is the correct one, or
Tomato.
do you tomato or the British, of course?
Of course,
But
tomato would be
I
the one.
learned American English and we say tomato,
Mhm.
so I always say both of them are totally
Mhm.
valid, okay? But then comes somebody from Ireland and says tomato or changes the
Tomato.
intonation of the word or the and for me it's just I can tell you what it's right, but I cannot tell you what's wrong. That's what I say most of the time.
Mhm.
Okay, I know the grammar. For example, you was is wrong. I don't okay, maybe
Mhm.
you can hear that outside, but when you say you was it's wrong. That's it. I mean,
Oh,
it's not.
okay. Well, here's the thing. Oh, sorry. I interrupted you, man.
No,
Go
that's
ahead and
basically
finish.
my idea. If you got it, please just
No,
tell me.
I certainly do, man. And here's the thing. Okay, so I'm sure we as teachers have to be the authority of a language. Once you call yourself a teacher, just like Gary said here, um, you have to know what actually becomes wrong. That doesn't mean that there's no wiggle room, and that's, in this wiggle room, that's when we add, the varieties of regionalisms, right? The differences in accent, of course, and also the different types of Englishes around the world, right? But having that into consideration, that's just the wiggle room, because there is a point in which something becomes incorrect or unintelligible. I like to measure my okay, so the bar for me to say that something is wrong or right would be intelligibility. Once your speech, for example, if I say that the apple is on the tablet, right? You're gonna go, what the heck are you talking about? Like, what's tablet? That's when you say tablet instead of table, that's when people won't understand what you're talking about. Anybody there might be some people who guess what tablet is, but most of the time, if you say that the phone is on the tablet, right? Then I mean, who would guess that the phone is on the table is your desired um, message here, right? But here's the thing, like it's all got to do with intelligibility, right? And then at the same time, it's our it's our job as teachers and our duty as teachers to, you know, like let students know that this is in the variety of English that I speak, the variety of English that I teach, this is the way it's said. However, there are some other ways, but if you pronounce it like this, that is going to become completely unintelligible, and then that's when things are wrong. But yeah, just
Okay.
I agree 100% with what Gary's saying. You know, like there is no language to be taught when prescriptive grammar is non-existent. You know, like here's the thing.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
there's got to be you know, like a
Like a
backbone
manual.
to a
Like you
language.
need a
There's got to
manual, you
be
need
exactly. There's got to
instructions.
be a structure to a language in order for things to make sense. Same thing. Like for example, if I start speaking language, even if my pronunciation was great, you know, or very clear, if I said I don't know, on, table, phone, is, it is understandable, right? Because there's only 4 words over here, but still, you know, like it's harder to for us to understand the meaning once we scramble the words like that, right? So there's got to be an order to it. There's got to be a reason for things to happen the way they do, and yeah, I mean, certainly it is our duty as teachers to know when the you know the threshold is when something becomes unintelligible or completely wrong. So
Okay.
that's the way I see it.
Totally agree.
I just would like to say something. Like, for example, you're saying that, I mean, I totally agree that it has to be like some kind of a understanding when you're speaking, right? The thing is, like, as Hugh was saying, when do we differentiate right from wrong? Like, for example, you and I, Frank, we were talking about like this guy, the white chicken, remember? No, not the white chicken, the
No,
black
not
chicken,
once
right?
again. The black again. He calls himself.
I mean, he basically teaches like every day. I mean, he focuses his content on Ebonics, right? I mean, this kind of like
Ebonism.
African
No, Ebonics, you mean? Yeah.
Ebonics, yeah, sure. So this kind of African American way of speaking, right? Like in the hood, like with a lot of different, let's say, different vocabulary that you can use
No,
in
you're
the
using
street.
very dangerous words there, man. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, the thing is, like, if you, as an English teacher, if you are not aware of how this, I don't want to say like sub language or this different
dialect.
way of
Dialect.
dialect, this difference in expression works, and then you go into or you want to talk to one of these speakers, your English will not be like that easy to understand. Oh, well, no, their English will not that be easy for your understanding.
Mhm.
So do we automatically say that the way they speak and the way they communicate is wrong?
Oh no, not by all means. That's actually why I said there's a wiggle room, you know, for dialects and well, regionalisms and all of that, accents themselves. Because I mean, not necessarily that it's wrong, you know, because you also have to take a look at the cultural aspects of a language, right? I mean, culture and language go hand by hand, and so here's the thing, you know, like we're talking about Ebonics in very specific regions of the U.S., right? But the very same thing happens in Mexico. You know, like Hugo talking about the fact that some people say Ancina. I would never in a million years say that Ancina is wrong, right? Because that's just the way the word is being used over there. But then if people say ansado instead of Ancina, or instead of así, then that's when things are wrong because it becomes completely unintelligible for everybody. Now, here's the thing, you know, like, but here's the thing, you know, like, for example, I might not be able to understand 100% what somebody using Ebonics or speaking Ebonics is, you know, like it means, right? But that doesn't mean that in his particular region or in his particular community, he's like unintelligible. That's the thing, you know, because he is understood by some people, right? So it's not that it's wrong. I would just say that it's not standard. And then it's my job as a teacher to be familiar, just like Gary said, like you can't really know every single variety of a specific word, right? But you can aim to know as many or to be familiar with as much as possible, right? And then once you know that there's many different ways of saying it, you might you know, tell your students, okay, so you might hear it like this and like this, and both of those are accepted or understood. But hey, there might be more. I'm just not familiar with them, right?
Okay. Gary.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add that, you know, if we're looking for a standard that of teaching English, I would say it was the system that allowed you to communicate in English across the widest possible location and situation. So, you know, if you want to teach a dialect, if you want to teach from a certain zone, and that's how they teach. And there's a guy that I follow, and he just does slang British English. And it's great. I mean, he does what he does. But, you know, that would be completely useless outside of the United Kingdom, and probably even outside certain areas of the United Kingdom, even within the country. So for me, I would say as teachers, we have to communicate the widest possible use of English. And the second thing that I would say, that I find students really like the security of being told this is the way you say it, because there's so many variations and they don't want to look foolish, they don't want to look wrong. And I think if you can instill that confidence in them by saying this is how you do it, you come across as a confident teacher, you come across as somebody who's knowledgeable, and they walk away with this sense of like, yeah, you know, however many variations there might be out there, this way is always going to be the correct way. And people get a lot of comfort from that.
But what about the students who say that, like, for example, when there are some certain teachers that say, like, this is not real English. The real English that you've been taught in school is not what they really speak in the street. I mean, not in the street, like in the hood or whatever, but like real everyday English. So the way that you should do it is this way, because that's how native speakers speak. So the thing, I perfectly understand that you said, like, okay, we should teach like in a standard way for students to be completely understandable when they speak, or when they have like different conversations with different kind of people. But having students say this is the real English seems like a little bit more attractive to them. Like, oh, so I want to learn I want to learn the real English, not what they tell me it's English in the book, right?
I would say that doesn't exist. Real English, I mean, look, if there are 47 different thousand variations and dialects, then what becomes real English? Like where I come from, I'm from the northeast of England, and we have dialects, we have accents, we have phraseology that is completely different from everywhere else. And sometimes I use that. Certainly when I go back home, I use that. But I know it is wrong. I'm not being, you know, I'm not creating double standards here. I know I am saying something wrong. Now, if you want to learn the Northeast, what we call the Geordie dialect, I'm happy to teach you, but that's what that is. It's the Geordie dialect. So this idea of like, oh, the real English on the streets. Yeah, you're pretty much like narrowed to about 6 streets. And then, you know, when you go down another street, your English just disappears. Whereas if you have standard English, you can go anywhere. And this other thing about the difference between English, look, I'm no fan of books. I never use English books. But, you know, look, past perfect is past perfect. You know, it really doesn't matter whether it's like on the street, in the hood, from a book. Past perfect is past perfect. I can teach it, you know, everybody can teach it. It's still the same thing.
Okay. Dave.
Here I will agree with Hugo, because I basically it's a question that I always I'm always I always wonder this: who decides the rules? I mean, who decides which is right or wrong? For example, let's not say conjugations, okay? Because it's something, well, I don't know. This is what I use in my mind, on my mind. I compare how wrong it would be to say yo eres. I cannot say yo eres the same way I cannot say I es. That's completely wrong, okay? But when you say, for example, we say yo, but in Argentina they say yo. So are they wrong? Because, or should we stick to the original language in Castilla because we speak Castellano? and we have to speak like the Spanish way, and like the movies. Joder, tío, venga, que podemos hablar así porque esa es la manera original en las que hablan en las películas. We don't speak that way, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. You mean it's a variation that we have, because I think that who decide how the language will be are the people. That's it. I mean, if most of people say something, how can I say it's wrong? I mean, I can explain, I can say, okay, this is what I know. I agree with Gary on that. You need to be confident about what you know. Okay, this is what we know, but I am no one to say that what they say, the way they say, it's totally wrong. Because, I mean, for example, sometimes I say, some people say íbanos. I don't know if that happens with Hugo, Fernando. I'm sorry, Gary, maybe this Spanish is not familiar to you, but
I think I'm keeping up. I'm okay.
okay,
I'm okay.
great. So they say, for example, some Spanish speakers say íbanos, which is not correct. It's íbamos, right? So, but I understand, because nosotros, nos, you see? So, íbamos, entonces íbanos, nosotros íbamos. You understand? It's like, I understand why they do this. And if 20,000 million of people around the world say íbanos, so when it's íbanos going to be correct? You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's going to be correct someday or not? Because murciégalo, it's now accepted by the Real Academia Española.
You know, when I was
actually
learning
what-
Spanish, I learned pacao because I went to Spain. I was in Andalusia, and they say for a fish that's cooked, they say pacao, and it was years afterwards that I learned it was pescado. But
Okay.
I learned pacao. So are the Andalusian Spanish people incorrect? As a native English speaker, I am going to say yes, they are incorrect. That is their accent, that is their dialect. It's perfectly acceptable, but is it Spanish?
Of course it is.
Yes.
I disagree. I disagree.
Okay,
It's
right,
a
right.
dialect.
It
It's not
is.
Spanish.
I would,
Okay,
I would say
Not that I am an expert on Spanish.
this
No,
is great.
no.
This is great. This is where I wanted to get
no,
to.
you know,
So,
I would say it is certainly Spanish, but that doesn't mean it doesn't deviate from the majority. And I guess that's when things, you know, become unclear. You know, if some specific variety of a word or a specific way of pronouncing a word, you know, like completely messes up or completely separates itself from the way that's mostly accepted, then okay, so I wouldn't say it's wrong, right? I would say it's an alternate way of pronouncing something, right? But I guess if I were teaching that specific word in Spanish, I would say, okay, so most people say it like this. You might also hear this, and that. You know, it's like for example, the way I teach English is, you know, like based on the American variety, the American accent, right? And then when I pronounce something, right, let's say, I don't know, like a specific word that's differently pronounced in the U.S. and then in England, right? Mostly pronounced differently, then I would, you know, take a moment to also say, okay, so this is the way Americans pronounce it. This is the way I pronounce it, right? But you're also going to hear it pronounced this way, or you will hear it pronounced this way, and that would be it, right? But then in the specific case of the word you mentioned, you know, I think things become wrong when they defy the status quo, right? Or maybe not wrong, but just exceptions to the rule.
I think
And
based
Frank-
on what Gary says,
Mhm.
nobody speaks correct English, because if we have the same
Or neither language.
instruction or the same
For that matter.
structure, and we all, depending on the religion, on the culture, on the place, on the geography, if we all variate this, then nobody speaks correct English. Everybody's
Yep.
wrong then.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%.
You would say that,
or
Gary,
everybody's
even
right.
you, because
Yeah,
you variate.
I would, because this goes back to the reality of being on
Yeah.
the street. Everybody speaks it differently, but I struggle to understand how a teacher could not have a definition of right and wrong. How can you go into a classroom and say, you know, this is the way you say the word fish, for example?
The spelling of it.
I just struggle to understand how a teacher cannot say this is right and this is wrong.
For example, when you say the word pecado in Venezuela, the letter S, we let air come out and we say pescado, pescado, and we eat the letter D. Okay, we say when you say pescado, and I just know people from Colombia that say pez, that they put the S, they emphasize the S.
Oh,
Okay.
they changed the sound. They actually pronounce it z, pescado.
Yeah, pez. Yes, even mostly here in Medellin. But but okay, but who says pescado when speaking, Gary?
Mexicans.
Maybe,
No.
but Mexicans say pescado too.
I've never heard anybody say pescado like that.
I mean,
Pescado,
maybe in some
no?
regions, but most of the times we say pescado.
Pescado.
Pescado, and you use the S and you use the D. Very good. Okay,
Yes.
okay, great. I didn't know that.
And look, like Fernando and I are from very different locations in Mexico. And,
okay,
and both of us pronounce it like that.
So if most of the people around the world don't say pescado, okay, we can teach it is the correct way, but the other ways are valid too.
Well, I think people find
do you
solace.
How
And
do
for
you
example,
then teach the word?
Because you have, I mean, in Spanish it's easier because S just have one sound. Letter E just has one sound. Letter C just has one sound. It's easier, okay? But if I okay, I'm going to speak the right Spanish, and I get to Venezuela and I say, ¿me puede dar un plato de pescado frito? La gente, bueno, ¿y de dónde? Where? The radio, the host guy here speaking, because I will, then I'm going to sound funny. Okay, I'm correct, but yeah, but it's the correct Spanish, okay? Because pescado, it's what we learn in school and what they teach. Yeah, but nobody says that way. So I think that there's a middle. Okay, you teach the way, but it's up to you to recognize when you can play with that. Okay.
Yes.
And I have a question for all of you guys. Like, can the correct way of speaking change? Like, for example, here in Mexico, I was taught when I was like 6, 7 years old that the palabra obscuro was the correct one with OBS, obscuro. But now if you go to the dictionary, you can find that word in the dictionary. Now it's oscuro. They omitted the B, right? So most likely they omitted it because it was a little bit more difficult for people to pronounce the obscuro, because in the end, basically you like deleted the B when you were like linking sounds. And now everybody says oscuro, right? Which is like a little bit faster and easier to pronounce. So I've seen a lot of people saying, that's not the correct word, obscuro. That's not how you pronounce it. And I'm like, okay, that's the way I was taught, and that's the correct way for me. Even those people nowadays, they don't use it that way. So can the correct way of speaking or pronouncing change through time?
Can I just clarify something here? Like, so in your old Spanish dictionaries, was it spelled OB? Like if we go back, like say 80, 90, 100, oh, okay.
In your opinion, Gary, is that the correct way to say it with a B?
Why are we doing this for I am not an authority on Spanish. If you want me to be okay,
because your opinion is very different. It's very different, and I like to I have to say I like to listen to different points of view, because I just told Fernando about this when we had our conversation. We agree. Yes, I agree. And I agree. And I agree. And I agree. But here we have more. So that's why I ask you. But
well, okay, look, imagine I was a Spanish student. I didn't know Spanish. I go to you guys and I say, you know, what is the Spanish word for obscure? And you said to me, well, it could be obscure, it could be obscure, obscure. I would leave your classroom really certainly not confident that I knew how to say the word, but even an understanding of what that word was. Whereas if you as a teacher said to me, it's obscure or obscure, and then I would have something to hang my hat on. I would have an understanding of what that word is. The more vague you are as a teacher, the less confident you are, the less you can communicate knowledge, I think.
So basically what you're saying, Gary, is that we as teachers, we have the obligation to provide certainty for students to use the language.
100%.
Okay, sure. And I totally agree with that, right? Because it's very different. I mean, you can see like different ways of expressing through time when you are, or when you become a little bit more fluent, and then you can not learn by a teacher, but learn the language by yourself, right?
Yep.
But at a certain point, you need to have like a structure to follow to feel confident that what you're speaking or what you're saying is completely understandable by the other person, right?
Yep.
Sure. Very good.
Mm.
Hugo, I
Hugo,
just,
yeah. Hugo,
I saw Hugo like having like something to say, but he didn't like quite got into the conversation.
Well, I agree with some things that have been said, and I totally disagree with some others. On the first place, I agree with Frank. Intelligibility is key, right? If you cannot get across your message across, well, it's something we can say wrong. I refuse to use the words right or wrong in language. And most of my linguist colleagues would agree with me, right? If not all of them. And to answer David's question about who says what's wrong or right, well, and how, well, the people decide, right? The social context decides what is right and what is wrong. Yeah, and your interlocutors decide what is right and what is wrong. And can language change the correct? Well, yes, because it changes from person to person. Yeah, what might be right for Frank could be wrong for somebody else, and your interlocutors decide. The social context decides what is right and what is wrong. Yeah, and David says something that it's totally true, and it's one more thing that adds up to the idea that there is no right or wrong. If what David you said, if there is a right and wrong, then everybody would be wrong, right? and yes, exactly, because there is no right and wrong. I insist, yes. And language molds itself through time, yes. And societies decide what is right and what is wrong according to their status, what they want, the image they want to project towards their interlocutors, right? I don't speak the same Spanish to my mom, to my grandma, to my students, or to my friends. It's a total different Spanish. And it's me, it's the same person. And all of these different Spanishes, let's say, are right in terms of right or wrong, right? And so I am in my early 50s, and I am finding it hard to understand my students who are in their early 20s. Sometimes they speak and I don't understand what they're saying, right? And they're speaking Spanish. Yeah. Are they wrong? Of course not. I had a chance to go to the Dominican Republic where they speak Spanish. I can understand anything of what they speak, right? Are they wrong? Of course not. Yes. So and well, and Gary says, how can a teacher go to the classroom and say that there is no right or wrong. Well, I think that it's very important that you understand that there is no right or wrong, and a student's confidence is not, well, we tell students, don't be afraid of making mistakes, because you learn from mistakes, right? If you're constantly telling students, no, that is wrong, that is wrong, that is wrong, that is even worse for their confidence than let them speak, right? But it all comes to their objectives. What is the objective of teaching, right? And who are you teaching to? And who are you teaching for? What is the language? What do students need the language for, right? And all this context, all this social context will tell if something is right or wrong, right? I don't think there is right or wrong. And let's remember that language is alive, right? The language changes constantly. And what might be considered right today might be considered wrong later, yeah, by some sectors, by some prescriptive sectors of speakers, right?
Hugo, I've got a question for you. What's a mistake?
That's a very good question. A mistake is something that a student would produce that could make the message he wants to get across lost, right? Or he could be misunderstood. And well, and that would be something, yeah. If the student produces something that is not intelligible, probably that's a mistake, right?
Okay.
And well, here we have we need to talk about the difference between error and mistake, right? But that's another topic.
And I mean, I just have a question for all of you guys. I mean, because we all teach language as a second language, right? I mean, we all teach English as a second language. But I just want that's exactly what I want to see. Like, is there a difference between ELT and an English teacher? I mean, Frank and I, we were talking and we were discussing that about like a couple of weeks ago. So what is the difference between an English language teacher and an English teacher?
Oh, sorry. Was that question directed at me?
No. That's a question for everybody. I mean, and I want you to process it, because when Frank and I were talking about that, I mean, when he exposed that idea, I was like, and then I got it. And I was like, yes, I don't want to say my thoughts, but I want you to tell me, what do you think the difference is between an English language teacher or an English teacher?
Gary is an English teacher, isn't he? Or not?
Yeah, I'm trying
yeah, basically, right? Based on that, basically. And we are in, I don't know this. I mean, I'm just guessing, okay? I'm just guessing because I find it interesting. But I would say, maybe it's wrong, and that English language teacher is what we do. And in Gary, it's an English teacher because he is from England, no?
I mean, I would certainly agree with your definition right there, but also it's about the content that's taught. You know, when we were discussing, you know, Fernando and I mean, an English language teacher is somebody who, you know, like teaches somebody to use the language, right?
Okay.
Then an English teacher is somebody who teaches more like literature. You know, like, for example, an English teacher in the US is somebody who teaches literature and then reading between the lines, and then, you know, like sub skills that have to do with text interpretation. And, well, you know, like an English teacher in the US is not somebody who teaches ESL. You know, there's actually a distinction between an ESL teacher or an an EFL teacher than it is. But I don't know if that's also the case in England, and I would be very interested in hearing Gary's side of the
because it's basically it will be basically the same as for someone who's speaking Spanish as a second language. I mean, here in elementary school, in secondary school, whatever, we have like lectura y redacción or Spanish, right? But the way they teach us use or how to use the Spanish language is different from a person that comes from any other country, a non-Spanish speaking country, and they want to learn how to speak Spanish, right? So it's very different. And I think that what we all can agree is like, if you really understand that you are teaching English as a second language, there can be, as Hugo was saying, no right and wrong, right? You can say like, this way is spoken. I mean, you can speak English in this way. And if you can use any other variations, it's totally acceptable, but you just have to have like a frame, all right, where to hold. And but if you, a standard, of course, right? But even telling students, I mean, if you go out of the box and you use it in a different way that is not the standard, it could be completely understandable for the other person. I mean, you can have a conversation, even if you're making mistakes. But in terms of how we use as a Spanish, like for example, in elementary school, as a Spanish teacher in Mexico, if you go out of the standard, that could be considered as incorrect, right? So I think that we can all agree that, once again, the context is very important.
Yeah, I think there's right. Yeah, there is right and wrong, but it depends on the context. Something can be right here, but it's not right there. Something can be wrong here, but it's not wrong there. And it's I mean, we have like the instructions, we have like the manual, but variations exist. And when you are confident about that and you tell your students, hey, this is what I'm teaching you. For example, I teach American English, and on American English, this is the pronunciation, but you'll find different pronunciations everywhere. That's not a lie, and that's not wrong, okay? Because yeah, Spanish, for example, the Spanish for people from Spain, I think they are the only one who say the letter C and the letter Z with celeste, zapato, but the rest of Spanish speakers around the world say zapato, celeste. So are we around the world, we are all wrong? I don't think so.
Of course. Okay. And guys, just go, Barry, go.
No, all I was going to say was the difference between being a native speaker. One of the things that I am often told by non-native speakers, the advantage that non-native speakers have over native speakers, is that you have learned the language. You know the process of learning the language, and I don't. Like, I just picked it up watching TV from my parents, from just everyday life. And I definitely think there is something to that, because we have to be, as a teacher, retold those things. For example, you know, I'll give you something basic. The difference between much and many, that had to be pointed out to me, because I mean, I knew obviously the difference, but I knew how to use it, but I had no idea why. I had to learn that. So I definitely think there is an advantage to non-native speakers teaching the language. But going back to this thing about right and wrong, I think there comes a point where the natives have advantage over the non-natives, because we just have that in-depth cultural instinctive understanding. And I am not taking anything away from those that, you know, are not native speakers. But
no, you're right.
I do think that brings in this whole element of what is right and what is wrong.
And
Right.
that's very, I mean, I love what you just said, because there's always one question from students, and I think that we can all agree in that, is students often tend to think that if you want to learn English, learn from a native speaker. And I would say, as everything we're discussing right now, it depends, right? Because what if you're like in an early stage of learning and you want to learn from a native speaker who is not really aware of how to teach the language, because he hasn't been aware of how to learn the language the same way. He just acquired the language, right? But what if you're an advanced student who is no longer like learning from the teacher, but learning by the use of the language. That way, if you want to expand your vocabulary, if you want to be a little bit more precise when you're speaking or when you are communicating, there might be an opportunity for the native speaker to really tell you how to use the language in real situations or different scenarios. So, as always, the difference is on what you think, on what you want as a student, right, to achieve. Because both can be completely fine. And I remember, Hugo, do you remember this teacher back in university, Kirk? It was Kirk? Yeah, right? He was a native speaker, and he was also an English language teacher, right? So maybe the insight, when you combine these two things together, it can give students a very nice overview of how to use and how the language must be used, right? In different scenarios. But just the same way as I am a native speaker of Spanish, I don't feel confident enough to provide a speaking class in front of elementary students or secondary students, because I know how to use the language, but I don't know how to teach it because I never been taught that way. So everything is just on what the students want to achieve, the objectives they have, and the phase or the point in time where they are learning is not the same as being a basic student or an advanced student. And everything relies on what they are experiencing right now, right?
I agree. Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, there's also a difference between, how professional an English teacher is, because, yeah, I mean, while naturally novice English teachers, regardless of them being native speakers or non-native speakers, won't have the necessary experience to actually deal with things that arise in the classroom, right? And then their nativeness or lack thereof doesn't necessarily have an impact on on how they handle the situation. Because here's the thing, like, for example, Gary was mentioning the fact that native speakers may have an an advantage over non-native speakers when it comes to specific areas, right? And then also he made the difference between non-native speakers having an advantage in other areas. And the way I see it is that, okay, so as a professional English teacher or as a professional anything that you do, it's your job to actually, look at your weaknesses and then make sure that you overcome them, or at least you make them less weaknesses as time as time goes by, so that you become the best possible version of what you can do, right? So regardless of where somebody was born, I just like Fernando mentioned, it has to do with less with geography and more with experience and I don't know, like the way they prepare themselves. But that's the way I see things.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree, Frank, and yeah, I also think when people overestimate native speakers as teachers, and native speakers, to practice your English, it's great, it's awesome, and it's because you can. I feel when you already know the language, the structure, you know how to speak it, you can be fluent. Then you start to imitate what you hear around you. Okay, what you and that's great, or what you listen to. Most of the part of my pronunciation comes from movies, comes from TV shows that I've repeated over and over and over and over. And of course, when you as I mentioned before, I knew the language by the books, but also at home, because my mother is an English teacher. Like that is, sir, she has a title, and she has all that I don't have, but all that I don't. But um, yeah, well, in this case, she taught me like deeply the language, and that's how I can teach it. But I had native English speakers, teachers that were just they just sucked the whole process, because yeah, because yeah, she was native, but she was from, I don't know, Uganda, something like that, Kenya, I don't know. And her English was, we couldn't understand in English, and she didn't speak Spanish, so the process was really difficult. We learned from each other. Like, what did she say? Did she say this? I don't know. Did she say this? And that's from as a student. That now I'm not speaking as a teacher. I'm speaking as a student. That sucks. I don't now at those moments I would have wanted as a teacher who speaks Spanish and says, hey, esto es así. Ah, okay, gracias. We can go back to English. So, but yeah, basically I agree, Fernando. Native English speakers as teachers, not all the time. They are not all the time like good
And
enough.
vice versa.
And vice versa, of course.
Applies as well.
Of course, yeah, for Spanish, yeah, of course. I mean, I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. When you, in my context, I know the structure of both languages because I grew up with this, learning the language, like the structure, diptongo, triptongo, hiato, acentuación, aguda, grave, esdrújula. I know all that,
Yeah.
but if I had to teach Spanish, I wouldn't teach that. You know what I'm saying?
Sorry, look, I meant vice versa. Like, the fact that you are a native speaker doesn't automatically make you a great teacher. Also, the fact that you're not a native English speaker doesn't make you, automatically also an amazing English teacher, right?
Yeah, you're totally right.
Because like there's something that has to do with the pedagogy behind teaching a language or behind teaching anything, and then the usage of it, right? I mean, we see it all the time. There are architects who are great at teaching architecture students, and then there are architects who can't, like, even if their life depended on it, right? Like transfer the knowledge, right? So like it has to do more with pedagogy than
yeah, totally.
Than how well you can use the language itself.
Of course.
Totally. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. So just to close it up, I just have one final question for everybody, and I would like you to have like a couple of seconds or minutes just to answer it. The question is like, what is one point of view that you want English learners or teachers watching this video in the future remember about teaching English as a foreign language?
That you can be right and wrong. But there is such a thing as right and wrong.
Okay. Gary, thank you very much. Luis, what do you take from this session today?
I need a couple of seconds to have my answer.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. No, I mean, I just think about it.
Okay.
From this conversation, I still think that you need to learn the right structure if you want to break the rules.
Okay.
There's a right structure, but sometimes when you use the wrong structure, it's not wrong. So it's complicated for us as English teachers. Gary, we gain confidence when we give confidence when you say, hey, this is right and this is not right. But it's very difficult for me. In my case,
I would say we have to justify why we think it's right. If we say this is right and this is wrong, and then somebody comes up and says, well, why is it wrong? We have to have the knowledge to be able to say why it's wrong and justify that and learn from it.
That's what's difficult for me. For me,
it's difficult for everybody, but definitely, knowing something is right and wrong, it's not fixed in stone. We can learn, we can develop. But yeah, right and wrong.
The only thing we can
think that right and wrong.
But when somebody asks, why is this wrong? The only answer I can give, because this is the correct way.
Oh, well, it depends.
It depends, because sometimes you can explain it, or sometimes
exactly
you cannot.
I think, wouldn't it depend on what the error was that you could
exactly.
I mean, again, if I held up an orange and said it was a banana, I'm sure you could explain to me why it's not an orange.
Exactly.
Of course, yeah. But we see a banana and language we don't.
Something harder to explain is why we say.
I mean, it's not. It's harder to measure that I mean, it's harder because I will always tell my students that my is the correct way to say am, and fuck, I had y,
The
from
why.
French.
One.
Fuck,
The why.
why? Come on. M Y is for my, but then you hear Conor McGregor and people from Ireland and say me. Your wife is seeing me DMs, baby, and I was like, so am I supposed to say? I mean, yeah, for me, that's I would say It's don't talk like Conor McGregor, but
or do if that's what you're going for. That's
maybe, but come on, can be wrong, but can be right. You're right,
It also
okay?
depends
Because
on the
if
context,
I'm in
right?
Ireland, I'm teaching
Of
English in
course.
Ireland, we say me.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
but if you
English-
said my in Ireland, they would know what you were talking about. If you said me in other parts of the world, they might not. So it's about teaching the level of English that goes across the widest amount of nations.
Of course, totally. Yeah, that's when you say something can be right and wrong. Yeah. Good
Nice.
point. Yeah, that's right.
Hugo.
Well, I would sum up by saying that it's all about communication, right? And teach our students communicate, and teachers help your students communicate.
Okay. Frank, any final thoughts?
Just like Hugo said, language is a tool, a means for communication, right? And then in order for that communication to take place, then we have to follow rules, right? Whether we like it or not. There are rules for a reason. Now, that doesn't mean that deviating from those rules doesn't also mean communication. It's just a different message that we're sending, right? So we have to know the rules in order to know when to break them and what happens when we break them, so that we can break them intentionally, right?
Okay.
I mean, there's got to be a reason why when I say there ain't no money, or I ain't got no money, I mean, technically it's wrong, but I'm sending, like this wave of a message that I wouldn't be sending otherwise if I said I don't have any money, right? So like there are also, the subtones that are also being hidden, and you might be sending that message intentionally or unintentionally. You might as well do it intentionally, right? So that's the importance of a grammar, and that's why I disagree, severely with those English teachers online who say or disregard grammar, as in, hey, grammar is boring, grammar is not important, learn English. And I always wonder myself, like, what do you mean learn English without learning grammar? Because I mean, it's an integral, it's a paramount component of language. Like there's no language without grammar. Otherwise, it's only vocabulary. Like, okay, but that's a topic for another day.
That is a topic for another day. And I hope we had the opportunity to
Certainly
come again and discuss some other things about the English learning, right? So guys, thank you very much for attending today. Thank you very much for being today. I sure think that your insight, your points of view are very valuable. And I think that it was like very nice to have like different points of view, because we all come from different backgrounds. We all have like different experiences. And I think that it is extremely nice to have like these points of view and to take them into consideration, to try to change the way we think, because that's reality of how new ideas grow, right? New ideas start like to flourish. And I just love to hear from you all, like the way you think or the way that you teach to your students. So thank you very much for being here today, and I hope that we can repeat this some other time in the future.
Sure,
Well, certainly a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
All of you guys. Okay, certainly looking forward to this becoming something frequent. Right? So,
Yeah.
That'll be nice. I mean, I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed this.
Yeah,
it's
me
so
too.
enriching. I love
So
it.
did I.
Pleasure meeting
Excellent.
all of you guys.
Me too.
So,
Thank you.
people, thank you guys.
Hello, everybody.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.